Hi, Annie.
Hey. So just wait a few more seconds and then we can start. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is the June 8th, 2022 GitLab releases and deployments AMA. So we are here today with a few people from delivery team, delivery group, as I suppose we should start calling ourselves. We are rapidly heading into splitting into our two teams, orchestration and system. But does anybody have any questions either, or in fact, there's nothing on the agenda, but does anyone have a question they would like to verbalize?
I have a question I would like to verbalize.
Please go ahead.
Can you describe in some details what the team split is going to encompass for delivery, and like what the end goals are, and what are and such?
Yes, great question. Thank you for asking, and thank you for having our first question. I'll go first, but would someone mind just doing some typing whilst I talk, and then I'm happy to jump in whilst we continue. So we currently are, or we have for the years that delivery has existed, been a single team, delivery team, responsible for deployments and releases. And in that work, we've had quite a broad domain. So we have put together deployment pipelines, we've put together release processes, but we've also been involved in setting up the Kubernetes clusters and migrating services. So to split that down into domains that are sort of team-sized, we are going to attempt to split into two teams. We will have the delivery orchestration team, which I'll be managing, and Alessio will be one of the engineers, plus Myra and Graham and Matt, who's just joined us. We'll be focused on how we actually kind of orchestrate deployment and release tasks. So practically day to day, this is going to include things like how do we get security fixes into security releases in a automated, painless way? How do we take a change that somebody has? Sort of, I suppose I'm simplifying it down into, if you have a thing and you want to deploy it to a place, orchestration will give you the framework and the tools to be able to do that. And then on the other side, we will have the delivery system team. Okay, do you want to talk that one through? I'll take over typing.
Yes, so the delivery system team will take more of building a effective and efficient platform that we can use, and the orchestration team can use to deploy all the application in the stage group. So I guess we will have a lot of challenges ahead, understanding also how we can move forward to the goal of having self-serve deployments from the teams and everything else. And I think what we are missing right now is to focus a bit more on building this platform that will be able to deploy all the applications on top of it. So we'll be more focused probably on the Kubernetes side, but clearly there will be some overlapping that we have with the orchestration team, right? So there is no as straight boundaries, but for sure there will be some overlapping that we'll have to cover. But in general, the Kubernetes part of the platform is going to be one of the main focus that we will have.
We're still trying to work out the exact kind of boundaries, but we've been talking a little bit recently about, so if we look at delivery kind of domain and tooling today, it's quite difficult to sort of see the edges because it's been built by one team and owned by one team. So that makes sense. But if we look sort of maybe where we want to get to, it hopefully starts to get a little bit clearer. So one of our big goals for delivery group is to be able to allow more teams to self-serve deployments. So at the moment, pretty much all of the changes come through delivery. For some people, that works really well. We have the auto deploys and they go out. Other people, that's a bit difficult. So they don't necessarily have to be grouped into auto deploys, but at the moment, for our sake, that's the way it works. So we'll be looking to see if we can set things up to get as many people self-serve as want to be self-serve. So I think if we start to look in that sense, then we all become more of a provider, an enabler. So orchestration is sort of enabling other teams to have a means to deploy, and system is perhaps giving us a means by which to deploy. So perhaps more metrics and giving us a way which we can uniformly tap into doing the things around deployments, like tracking them, monitoring them, as well as actually the simple act of code hitting a server. So we've got lots to define still on this. We will certainly be working together at least through this quarter. We have shared OKRs for this quarter. And I expect over the next few months, we have a lot of things where we'll have shared ownership and we'll work together with each other. So I think we'll also start to sort of articulate some of our boundaries a bit more over the next few months.
Thank you much.
Great question. Thanks for asking, Skarbek. Does anybody else have a question that they would like to verbalize?
I have another question if no one else has any other questions.
Yeah, go for it. I
recently saw a proposal about blue-green deployments, kind of just flash through the issue tracker. I'm kind of curious as to, is this something that we are pursuing? And if so, where are we with that? And is it happening? I guess, I don't know.
I can tell you my thoughts on that. I mean, I think it's a very interesting idea. I think we probably wouldn't want to just do it for the sake of just doing it. And the main reason for that is we already have a lot of complexity particularly around our deployments. So we run multiple clusters on Kubernetes, not all the same type. So we have our one regional cluster, we have our 3 zonal clusters. Just throwing blue-green in amongst that for the sake of it will add a lot of complexity. We also have canaries, canary on staging, canary on production. So just to do it, there's probably not a very obvious, it makes our life better. However, it is an interesting concept, and I think it's something which we should certainly keep in mind as we plan things out over the next few years. There couple of big benefits that I've seen on blue-green is one is around the speed at which you can reverse off something, right? So you're not really even technically rolling back. You for those people who maybe don't know blue-green, you deploy and you're running on a version, you deploy the new version alongside it and you flip the traffic over. So rather than us having to speed up a rollback pipeline to recover, we would just put the traffic back on the previous running one. So it could be an interesting one. It may make things easier as we get to self-serve. Like it may make it easier for a stage group team to be able to kind of reverse something out without running a rollback. But it certainly does add complexity. You need to keep track of a lot more pieces and a lot more versions. So we would need to consider quite carefully, I think, what does it bring enough value and sit alongside our current canaries, which give us our rolling deployments, to be able to justify the extra kind of operability, as well as the actual physical, like actual cost of running twice as many clusters is not a trivial sort of material cost as well. So it's an interesting idea. We're certainly not going to just implement it next month, I think. Does anyone else want to throw in anything? Like, what are other people's thoughts about blue-green? Has anyone seen this like as a kind of interesting practice being used somewhere?
I can talk to that if you don't mind.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, I work in applied ML, so we build models on our side to solve problems around GitLab. That's what we're doing right now. We're not at any stage where we need this right now, but in past companies, when we've had models going on, you do tests around like model drift and data drift, but you really are never ever going to get a sense of like, is your model operating better or well or similar as expected, unless you're putting it through traffic that's real. So we did blue-green deployment with our new models at like 5% of our traffic and just sort of let them run for a few days and then came back and sort of looked at the difference and was like, yeah, we're getting difference in or improvements, or we're getting reductions, or this entirely broke the flow for every user on us that got it one time. That was awkward. But you get these sort of senses of like, it's easy to sort of take a small batch of your users and sort of get them onto the upgraded path for your ML models. Which really provides more information than you could probably get any other way. So
it's a really interesting one. Yeah, go ahead, Alessio.
We had interesting thoughts on this about the ability to package some custom versions of the application with the current content of whatever is running in production, plus let's say a single merge request, and give them share of production traffic. So something like proving that your code is worth production by running on production before you can even become part of the package itself. So this was an interesting conversation we had, but we were still migrating to Kubernetes. So we kind of put all these thoughts on hold because we still had, at that point in time, we still had to move to Kubernetes, which could give us the ability to run something like this. So this is something that, yeah, depending on what we plan to do, can be interesting. It poses a few challenges like database migrations, breaking changes, and things like that. But I definitely see a situation like this that you described, where basically you want to say, I have an idea, which is something like an A/B testing. I have an idea. I want to see how this actually behave in production. And so I give you a slice of it, and you can report the metrics, traffic usage, memory, whatever, and then you kind of graduate this idea and say, yeah, this can handle production traffic, and you merge it.
Interesting. Do you think at our current scale, Alessio, like that, would that be at all feasible? Like, I mean, assuming, would it be all changes, or do you think like there are special categories of changes that we could consider something like that for?
So that's a great question, Amy. So I think that the two biggest challenges on this at our scale are the pipeline timing. So building that type of artifact timely by also having all the tests and everything and being able to deploy it, it's a challenge. And so I'm kind of wondering if we want to bundle a couple of changes together. So we kind of have rounds. So let's say we have 3 testing window during 24-hour, and you can kind of join a testing window with your merge requests. And so we bundle things together. But then problem is that you don't know what is affecting what, right? So in DL world, we would like to be able to just give someone a box or a pod or a part of a deployment with its own metrics. That's the perfect idea. And this goes into the second problem, which is if we can identify safely changes that are, I would say, patchable on top of an existing image, then that's easier, because at that point we can build this very quickly. We can just pick the production image, apply the patch on top of it, and retag. And so we have something which is ready, but change. So there will be posing challenges with dependency upgrades, database migrations. So we really need to think about what type of changes can we test in this type of environment. Yeah, I think that for reason, all the algorithmic optimizations or things like that should be good candidates for this type of changes, as well as UI changes, or so this type of changes should be okay, and probably even easy to build, package, and test out.
Interesting. Yeah. And I wonder, I mean, sometimes we hear about changes that are not easily controlled by feature flags. I guess this could be an alternative way to actually try and safely put these things into production and have a way to roll them back out as well.
Yeah, because I think that the biggest value here is that if we build a system designed around this, then we have metrics that are tied to the change itself. So we can put labels on the pods running custom versions of the application, then we can extract. So we can compare how does this behave on the same, not the same traffic, but the same, because if traffic is routed to that image, is not routed to the main one. But in the same time of the day when we have this type of traffic, how does the two versions compare? Is it using more memory? Is it faster? And I mean, this is something that we can't do today. So I mean, I think it's good. It's a great improvement.
So I have a follow-up question, Alessio. You utilize the terminology package quite often when you are describing potential solutions. Normally, for our current auto deployment mechanism, we build everything and deploy all of that at the same time, in quotes, I should say. Are we talking about potentially wanting to segregate pieces of our application out into smaller packages, like the container registry would be its own item to be deployed to, for example, that would remove it from some sort of alignment. Container registry was a poor example. Maybe Gitly is a better example, where items that are built together, such as Gitly, because we include that version inside of the GitLab code base, would we need to start segregating those deployments out into maybe their own packages to some extent?
That's a great question. I think that I may be wrong on this, but there is a product decision around having a single package that just installs and gives you everything, which is what generated this situation, which is, say, painful for us when we want to deploy GitLab.com. But on that specific aspect, there are improvements we can do on our own side. So I'm thinking very simply. So right now, we always wait for omnibus packages that takes longer compared to CNG images to build, because we have the deploy box, which is running migration, that is a VM. But there's no reason that why we can't run migrations on Kubernetes as a Kubernetes job instead of on a VM. And it's also even safer, because we potentially we could run more of them, and the database itself will lock the concurrent migrations, but the migration that gets first on the database is safer, because you can't change the content of the migrations on a pod. It's an atomic unit. It's running with what is bundled. So I think that's a great idea. So if we do something like this, we can do clever things like did Gitly change compared to what is running in production right now? No, I will not wait for omnibus packages. I would just skip Gitly, prefect, and all those deployments and go straight to wait only Helm and deploy the Kubernetes cluster. But right now we can't do this because of migration.
Awesome. Great questions. Excellent. Chad, we come to you, so we don't run out of time. Please verbalize your question.
Sure. Random question that came up as part of an MR I was looking at yesterday. Can at runtime we expect every type of deployment, Omnibus or Docker or whatever, to have an installed and fully expanded node modules that matches that version of the deployment, or do we not necessarily expect that to exist at runtime in some deployments or any?
Do you mean our deployments or even customers?
Anyone, like, can we depend on it at runtime, for example, in a Rails helper that's going to like look for the existence of an image? Yeah, that was my
Omnibus.
assumption as well.
Omnibus will replace content on disk for you. So I can briefly tell you of an incident that we had with Gitly that was based on this assumption. So we have on disk what we think we have on disk. So it was around 14.0. So very briefly, Gitly has a binary helper, and basically it forks and spawn a new helper, and they communicate over binary encoded messages. Okay, so what happens here is that they broke the API for 14.0 as a major release. We can break things type of situation, but when you run Omnibus, Omnibus replace binaries on disk. But before you run reconfigure, you're still running the old Gitly versions in memory. So what happened was that the binary running version 13 something was in memory and was shelling out and forking to run the helper, which was replaced on disk. Because we were during the installation period, right? So they couldn't communicate, because the API was broken, and so every request was failing. So that's the thing, right? So Omnibus start, replace things on disk, and then rehab the processes. So you have a window of time where the content of the disk will be the content of the next package, and you may be running something that is the previous version of it.
Right. So even if it does exist, you can't even necessarily count on it to be the right version during deploys. Okay, that's what I thought. I wanted to confirm with y'all. Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks for asking, Chad. Does anyone else have any questions that they would like to verbalize? No? Fantastic. One thing I do want to say, so thanks so much for the great conversation today. Thanks, Garbek, Chad, for your questions, and for everyone else for sharing thoughts and opinions on this. Alessio, you mentioned optimizing post-deploy migrations by running them on Kubernetes. Doesn't have to be this week, but at some point, could we get an issue created for that? Because I think that would be a really good thing for us to have planned in.
I think we may already have one.
We may have one.
Search for it first, but yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. Great chatting to you all. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Take care. Bye.